I saw one little thing in here regarding the CVS discussion. I guess if we go to the third page of the minutes, it's the third paragraph down, the one that begins with Justin Dates continues. The last sentence says Tom Powers does not the double-sided parking either. Tom and I just spoke about that. It should say he does not like the double-sided parking either.
Do you have anything else? You can correct that, right? And we can approve it subject to that correction?
We'll just note it as approved with the correction.
Okay.
Okay. I move that we adopt it with the correction as is.
Second.
Second.
Have a second. Any more discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Tonight we're going to have a scoping session for the Wildberry Lodge project. This would be, are we opening a public hearing? Is that what we do, or just a scoping session? It's just a scoping session. So everybody will get a chance to speak if you keep it brief. They're going to give a short presentation first to just bring everybody up to speed on the project design.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Turk, and pardon me because I'm fairly technophobic, so here we go. Okay, Wildberry Lodge. Rocking Horse Ranch has been catering to families since 1958. We seem to find our niche in addressing, quote, the needs of families that come to the Hudson Valley, spend 2 to 3 nights, return home. We're 120-room property of Rocking Horse Ranch. We have year-round activities from one of the largest saddle horse operations in the world, to 4 heated pools, 6 water slides, a small lake with banana boating and water skiing. We like to think our food is pretty darn good. We have chefs from the area, most of them are CIA graduates, and we employ year-round a core staff of 210 full-time staff members, and each week we have 100 to 150 part-time or quote seasonal employees. These are high school and college kids that are back on school break. So it seems to work out well in the immediate area. We hire from Highland, Walk Hill, New Paltz, Marlboro school systems primarily, and it seems to be a good base for the families, a lot of the students that are getting their first jobs in the community. The indoor water park concept has been around for approximately 15 years. We have a small one, about 5,000 square foot indoors at Rocking Horse. It seems to have done very well for us. We've recently earned a TripAdvisor. We're number 7th in the country. We beat all of Disney resorts except for the Wilderness Lodge at Disney hotels, both California and Florida, at the Rocking Horse Ranch. In 2004, we purchased, in the winter of 2004, Splashdown Beach from the Cornell family, and we are in our 10th season of operation. 3 years ago, I brought in the bottler license from the Mattel Corporation, and it really kind of secured our footprint in the young family destination travel. We don't want teens. We don't want gangs of teenagers rolling through the park, just like a Six Flags. It works great, and young families come and enjoy themselves at both of our properties. We'll review that in a little bit. This is the scale footprint as it sits on the property. This is fully built out at 250 rooms, 70,000 square foot indoor water park, 10,000 square foot indoor conference center, 8 exterior tennis courts, 6 indoor courts. Front on view. We're trying to keep to the, I like to call it the culture of the community, which I look at the Hudson Valley and I consider it kind of a melding of Catskill, Adirondack, Colorado, and Napa Valley, all kind of blended into one. If you drive around and even look at some of the thruway rest stops, you'll see what I'm kind of talking about. And we think that we can really hit it. We've been using architects that specialize in this type of design. They're from contracted Whitewater West. This is a firm in Calgary, Canada. They did an initial layout for us. The square box is the interior portion. You load up onto the slides on a 60, 75-foot tower. Anywhere in between, there could be loading zones up in between at different heights. Those are all slide tubes on the exterior that come back around. And if any of you've been to Rocking Horse Ranch, we have that at Rocking Horse as well. Those are family raft rides, and we can look at it later if anybody's curious. We can show you some cut sheets we brought with us. And a small aquatics area on the exterior for days like today where they can enjoy the beautiful sunshine. Climbing's essential. Everyone here knows. I don't need to remind us how the Northeast, we are known for our climbing here in the Shawangunk Range. I think it's important that we showcase one of the most beautiful indoor climbing centers that we can offer. I'd love to interview and talk to some of the local climbing experts, bring them in, and this absolutely would be a perfect fit for a local contractor. Same with the zip line station. We see a 4 to 6 line zip line station, perfect for the family destination. Indoor bowling alley. This would be as well one of the food courts in the hotel, a 10 to 12 lane bowling alley. And I've seen these successfully operate. Yes, I've seen them on cruise ships. I've also seen them on Colorado ski resorts. It's a perfect fit for the young family. The ice skating rink we envision here is not a hockey-style rink. We see a very large free-form mechanical rink with a nice island in the middle for people to rest, get some refreshments. We see the family hot springs placed strategically around with lots of kind of flaming pits to kind of accentuate the ice skating pavilion. You can see some of the architectural hints we're talking about. Some of you know I love tennis. Can't get enough of it. Of course, when I do get it, I get the crap beat out of me, but I love playing it. And I do see a large tennis center here. I think since SUNY imploded the bubble on campus, there really hasn't been kind of this center for folks to call home for tennis. This would, of course, be open to the hotel guests, but I see this as definitely part of a New Paltz tennis center, a New Paltz tennis club. Talking with Rich Kaufman here most recently, and we both agreed that a center court would be ideal to hold tournaments. At this size, this could host NCAA regional tournaments. I was talking with Tim Smith over at Marist, and we could definitely host several decent-sized USTA and NCAA tournaments here. And of course, a spa. I can't back up. There we go. Sorry. Out of control. Spa. The spa would probably just be big enough to fit the needs for the hotel guests at 250 rooms. Of course, if there's availability and people would like, absolutely within welcome outside guests to these facilities. We think a large conference center is critical. There really is no conference ability of this size to handle between 500 and 600 guests on a New York State Thruway corridor. I think this would serve the Hudson Valley center for the most part very good. As well, there's going to be opportunities for folks to host family events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, and multiple business events at once. Of course, there'll be operable walls that'll be soundproof, so we can have 3 or 4 meetings going on simultaneously. And one of my favorite opportunities as we're becoming more of a foodie destination at Rocking Horse is a demonstration kitchen. In the fall, we're going to be meeting with the folks at the Culinary to get some more advice. We're adding on a 2,000 square foot dining facility at Rocking Horse Ranch. We want to bring cook stations out to the guests. We want to have what's called action stations. And it's only becoming more an important component to guests, and when they do come to visit, that food becomes part of the appeal, part of the destination. So we want to take it one step further and have a full-scale demonstration kitchen here. So families, while their children are in the facilities, or they're taking a tennis lesson, or they're doing rock climbing, or they're in a water park, parents can sit and get some adult ed regarding cooking. We've also had a very brief brief meeting with Kevin Israeli. He'd love to be part of something like this. You know, again, I'm throwing names out to the people that have seen it, have embraced it. It's a great idea. I'd like to learn more. We think it's a great idea. We think this could be a great adjunct to the Culinary Institute of America. We have not spoken to them yet. We plan on talking to them in the fall. But, you know, what a great way for a family to enjoy themselves together, yet also have some quality time separately. Right now, I'm going to turn this over to our engineer, Ross Winglevitz and Jane Samuelson, to give you more the nuts and bolts perspective of the project. Thank you, everybody, very much.
George, would you like me to talk about procedurally where we are, so that everybody understands? You're here tonight as part of a public scoping session that has been set for this project. The board had determined that environmental impact statement is required for the project to move forward. So as part of that environmental impact statement procedure, we had submitted a draft scoping document, which was posted on the town's website. It's available for everybody to look at, I think, along with the concept plan of the project. We're here tonight to discuss that document, which is a 19-page document which outlines a lot of the potential environmental impacts for the project. So you're here tonight, you can provide comments. I'm going to go over it briefly for you. Provide comments to the board for them to consider in finalizing this document. And then after this evening, there'll be 10 days for written comments to be received by the board. And then that'll all be considered by the board in finalizing the scoping document, which is basically the table of contents of the environmental impact statement that we're going to need to prepare for the project. Just to give everybody a kind of understanding of where we are. I also want to briefly just go over the plan with you. Steve talked at length about the building and the amenities, and did an excellent job. I think he's done a great job of pulling together many different opportunities here for the property and for the Paltz area. From a site perspective, so everybody knows where we are, this is the thruway exit ramp, the thruway tolls here, intersection of 299 and the intersection of 299 and South Ohio Road right here. It's a 57-acre site that was previously proposed for several different applications since the early 90s. There was a Walmart here. We were involved in an application for Crossroads mixed-use project here on the property back in 2006-7. So it's a well-known property in the community. The access point to the site is off of 299 at the current Parodies access road intersection of 299. What we're currently proposing is a right turn in, right turn out, so that we don't have lefts across traffic here, which is something the DOT is going to provide comment on and the acceptability of that. With an internal traffic circle and an access out to South Ohio Road, and then cars will have to come north to the left on 299 into New Paltz downtown. The site's going to have internal parking with about 560 cars. Previous plan had about over 1,000 cars on parking lot. This is about 560 currently proposed. Whoops. And there'll be a secondary access on South Ohio Road, about a quarter mile down from the intersection of 299. There are several wells on the property that service the property. Those will be used and be tested at length, and will be retested for water quality again as part of the procedure. The draft scoping document, which was posted on the website, and is the basis basically what we're hearing today. This is the outline again for what we're going to study for the project. It includes an introduction and description of the project so that anybody who receives it can become familiar with the project. And then it goes on to outline the contents of the environmental impact statement that will be prepared for the project. There'll be a significant executive summary summarizing all the impacts, potential impacts, a description of the action, Here we're going to talk about sewer treatment plants. We're proposing either an on-site plant or connection to a town sewer district, so there's two options for that. Wetlands, there are no proposed wetland disturbances for the project, but we will discuss where the wetlands are on the site, where we are in relation to those wetlands, and that we're not going to be disturbing wetlands directly, where we are in compliance with the town of New Paltz wetlands rules. This has been written with that in mind. Groundwater, as I said, there's several wells on the site. This project has significantly less demand for water than the previous project, even though it's a hotel water park. A lot of it for the pool water is recycled. There'll be a lot of water saving fixtures put into the project. We're projecting between 60 and 70,000 gallons per day of water use. The previous project was around 95,000, so significantly
Excuse
less.
me, can I just hold you up there for a second? We don't really have to go over all the details. Like, this is really about developing the scope, and I want to give everybody a chance to contribute.
So I'll just hit the titles.
Yeah, just, because we got a long way to go here.
Yep. Plants and animals will be addressed. Aesthetic resources. Historic and archaeological resources. There wasn't anything significant. That'll be reiterated. Transportation, probably the biggest issue. Significantly less again than the previous project, and that'll be outlined and studied in detail here again. Land use and zoning. The project does require amendments to the zoning. Nobody envisioned a resort water park like this when they wrote this zoning many, many years ago, so that needs to be addressed by amending the zoning to address this new type of use that exists, kind of combination of uses in the zoning law. Community services will be looked at. Energy resources, sustainable design. Obviously, we need to consider that in the current environment. That's a big issue, so that'll be addressed. We'll talk about LEED certifications or design standards and so forth. And then there'll be several alternative studies as well. It requires study of alternatives, including a smaller footprint, higher building that would propose to go to 5 stories and reduce the footprint, so on and so forth. Different ownership scenarios for water and sewer. So I'll turn it over to the board, but we're here tonight to take the comments, not necessarily respond to your comments unless there's some clarification that the board may want from us. And then those comments will be reviewed by the board and then addressed in the final document, the speaker draft. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I didn't mean to be rude, but we're very early in this thing, and we don't need the technical details. Okay, this is about developing scope, and I want to give everybody a chance to contribute, whether you've looked at the scoping document on the draft on the website or not. You're welcome to make comments. We're going to bring up all the issues that we may or may not have thought of, but you can also submit written comments to the board at any time for the next, I think we have 10 days. He said 10 days, I'm not sure, till August 11th. So it's, pardon?
10 business days.
10 business days, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to note that there are additional copies of the scoping document on the table there.
Okay, so if anybody needs to get one.
Sun bothering your eyes?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know what to do about it exactly. Get sunglasses maybe. This property was formerly called the Plesser property, or still called the Plesser property. We had the Crossroads Development Project most recently. The fact that this is less impact than the previous project doesn't really have a lot of bearing on discussing the project. That project was not approved, and nothing ever happened with it. So we don't have to compare to previous projects and make it sound better. This project stands alone, and everybody should consider it for what it is. Do we have a sign-up sheet for people to talk to?
Excuse me,
I'd like,
please use the microphone.
Must be my voice.
I don't need that, so if people want to speak, we can just fill them in.
When anybody comes up to speak, because we would like to have your name and address, where you live, so that we have it for the record. The first person on the list here is Dave Porter.
Well, I feel like deja vu all over again. I've been very much involved in the EIS process for this area 3 times around. And so I think I have a pretty good sense of the crucial issues, not specific to this particular project as presented to us, but the generic issues concerning the site. And I just wanted to go through several of these that seemed especially critical in the past reviews that developers in the past really have not paid too much attention to. And I would just like it to get on the record right away in the initial scoping, so we don't have to put that off to a later kind of comment and revision process. The earlier we can address these issues, I think the better the process will be for everybody. Clearly, the outline that was presented, that's in the draft scope, does incorporate all of the crucial issues in a general kind of form. And I just really want to comment especially on several of these. The water issue, I think for this kind of project, this notion of recirculation of the water would be pretty vital because it is using a lot, and well, that was briefly mentioned. Clearly, there have to be more details about that. I think it would be worthwhile to investigate a system like the Havre Maybe Institute that really tries to not use any additional water. I don't know the details of that, but I know it's one of the more advanced systems of water saving, and I think that would be something very worthwhile to examine. The feasibility of this project, since it depends so much on water. The stormwater issues and wetlands, the water quality traffic goes, and I know that there have been real problems with those kinds of analyses in the past. One last thing I wanted to mention about traffic is that it's important to look at the worst case traffic volumes. That is, by day, there are certain days of the week that are worst case. There are certain seasonal times, of course, that we know there are really heavy traffic as well. And the cumulative analysis should incorporate those kinds of worst case analyses. The fiscal impact, I know Steve Burke has talked about, it was mentioned in the newspapers, talking about wanting to have a pilot for the project. So clearly that has to be taken into account in looking at that in some detail. The last thing I want to just mention is the issue of the toxic soils. Last time around, the Crossroads project did a very poor job with that issue. And I think that that should be addressed from the get-go. There is a huge area that used to be orchard on that site, and the last analysis that was done for Crossroads pretty much ignored that because they took soil testing all around the outside of the area where the orchard had been. So that clearly it did not show the need for significant remediation. As I look at the map, the site plan, clearly there's going to be a tremendous amount of disturbance of the soil, huge amount of parking right there where the orchard had been. And that really has to be taken seriously. Let's not wait until the public hearing on the EIS. Let's get that identified from the very beginning. Get that serious kind of analysis. Your advisor, Dave Krauser, knows how that can be done. I think that definitely should be included in this. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Please submit some written comments if you want. Yes, appreciate it. Next on the list is Paul Brown.
Hi, good evening, Paul Brown from Paltz. I served as chair of this august body when the last, and I see several colleagues who went through the last iteration and threw it into IS, and when the economy dropped out, I'm pleased to see Ross Swinglovitz here to parking for their project, which I think is really exciting for our town, and maybe work with the Mohawk Reserve, and maybe work with any other developers. What is the land look like? What are the potential? There was some talk of having some kind of refueling site there. It sound like a great entrance to New Paltz, but I feel if there's traffic mitigation to be done, that bit of property that I believe most recently was owned by the New York State Thruway is worth looking at. I'm excited. I'm glad the community's involved. I'm glad the developer and the planning board has made this possible and so clear. And I look forward to this project moving along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go around, okay? I'm not excluding anything. Give us your name and address.
Sure. Hi, I'm Dan Winfield. I live in New Paltz, over in the Lint Drive community. I guess I'll have to learn how to play tennis a little bit better. There are 14 courts proposed. We'll have to get me to improve my game a little bit. It's an exciting project. It's a known family. There are 3 generations here tonight. Nobody's moving any place. You know, Rocking Horse Ranch has been very successful for many years as a place where people come from essentially all over the eastern coast. For New Paltz, I think it's going to be a win-win kind of situation. I know you all have to do all the hard work, but I'm very hopeful in terms of my taxes being affected somewhat positively. The traffic, personally, I think most of the people are going to make a right on the thruway, go to the Wildberry, and stay there. I don't think it's going to be a tremendous impact. I'm maybe naive about it, but I don't think it's going to be a tremendous impact in town. And I certainly look forward to the jobs situation. Rocking Horse Ranch, as it is now, employs hundreds of people. This is going to be an even bigger project. So, thank you very much.
Next. Anybody? I hope you'll at least submit written comments then. Okay, we'll keep that open for a while, and I just want to remind you, this is just, the scoping document is really sort of a table of contents. It's not the final anything. We're going to have plenty of time to comment on these things, to review what's proposed. We do like to get the scope out of the way relatively quickly in the beginning, so we know what direction we're going with things. So if you have comments, it's August 11th. Once the scoping document is adopted, the draft EIS will be prepared by the applicant and submitted to the planning board. The board will then use the scope to review the DEIS and determine whether it's sufficiently complete to start the public review process. So, once the DEIS is accepted, it will be circulated for comment by the public and involved and interested agencies. The board will hold public hearings at that time. The board will then respond to any comments on the DES by preparing the final environmental impact statement, which will be the board's document. So tonight is just a limited objective, review the draft scope and ensure that everything that we want them to study is included. So don't be shy if you think of something. Okay, we're going to move on to some other business. If you want to come up with something else, feel free. Next on the agenda.
At the August 11th meeting, I would just like to propose a couple dates that if folks are interested in walking through one of our properties, especially Rocking Horse, and see, where we've come, how far we've been there since 1958. We've taken a pre-existing property. We'll show you some of our treatment facilities, our filtration, some of our older filtration, some of the filtration we're converting to, and a lot of it really is literally like that much waste of water in some of the more modern cartridge and low-pressure vacuumless diatomaceous earth. But I'd love to show our property, especially we'll be in full bloom the month of August and September, so it's a great time to see and show what we can do. And to have the palette of that site there, landscape and mechanicals is just going to be a phenomenal opportunity. So I'd like you folks to see it firsthand. So we'll have some dates ready for the August.
Okay.
Lyle, are we going to discuss as a board right now other things that we would like to see in the scoping document?
We can. Could certainly do that.
Good time. Because I thought there were a couple of things that
Okay.
I wanted to emphasize that are included in the scoping document. For instance, the draft scoping document on line starting after 103, there's some bulleted points where it talks about impacts on land, impacts on surface water. I think it would be important to include as a bullet the pilot impacts on the school district as they relate to the 2% tax cap. I think that's especially important considering what we've gone through recently with the Wilmerite application. And I think to echo Dave Porter's point about the traffic study, I would really like to see traffic studies that identify worst case scenarios. One thing that I was frustrated with regarding a recent applicant and their traffic study, where it seemed like they were cherry picking days that didn't feel applicable to our town or when we actually have traffic issues. So for this project, I would definitely like to see a traffic study that looks at Friday afternoons and Sundays when clients of this resort would be leaving, or holiday Mondays. And then two other documents that I thought were very important were the note we received from the Department of Transportation. They also emphasized the timing of the traffic study and making sure that we're really looking at times that are applicable to our community. And the DOT letter spoke about a proposed roundabout. I imagine they're talking about a roundabout that would be built at the entrance of the thruway. So yeah, I would like to see that fully explored in this scoping document. They also spoke about having a pretty robust drainage study, which if you look at the other document that I think is important for us to look at is the ENCB's notes on what they think are the issues regarding this type of project. So stormwater management and where how that is going to be handled. And Steve, I had mentioned this to you a few months back when you presented to the town board. I think like an amazing opportunity, and Dave Porter brought it up tonight, is this idea of what they do over at the Omega Institute with their Echo machine and how they purify water, and they don't use chemicals, they're using algae and snails and whatever else. And I think what's interesting about that, besides a greener approach to remediating water, is also just you would be creating an additional tourist attraction for your resort. So I would like to see that explored and what the options are. And I think again in the ENCB note, they volunteered one of their members, Ms. Murphy, who has some expertise in identifying green initiatives that actually can save you money. So I think things should be looked at through that lens. You shouldn't be forced to look at green initiatives just because they're green, but we want to encourage you to look at green initiatives that would be green but also make economic sense for the project. So I think taking a look at that ENCB note and using the resources that they're offering would be very valuable. Another thing that I believe is important regarding the site plan is sidewalk easements, bike lane easements. I don't feel like that's been identified right now. We're basically doing that for every applicant that comes before this board is requiring a sidewalk easement, and I'd rather see that addressed from the beginning as opposed to something, I didn't realize you wanted this. I think that's important to emphasize from the beginning. another question I had about the 550 proposed parking lots. I want to get a sense of how many spots you have at Rocking Horse, based on staff, based on guests. I want to see that the ratio is similar, because one of the issues that we're going to have are folks are going to talk about how much impervious surface that this project is going to create. So the more of that stuff is addressed head on, I think, that will be very helpful as we look at this. And the ENCB was also suggesting that we use an environmental planner to assess the impacts. We had a discussion of that regarding the Wilmerite application. We never, as a board, hired an environmental planner to look at that, but that's something that should probably be considered early on. Do we need to, as a board, hire an independent consultant to look at this from an environmental perspective to kind of try to make sense of what your engineer is proposing? I'd like to kind of address those things head on. And I think another question that the public will have is regarding the zip lines and the other recreational space and how that affects open space and wildlife, and are we displacing wildlife by having more recreational space? I mean, it seems like there's a much bigger issue in New Paltz with displaced wildlife than we've ever had before, where everyone is seeing bear regularly and deer regularly in the center of town, which we never have seen before. So I think those things need to be looked at early on. I think that is all that I had.
Yes, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I could guess at the answer, but I'd rather hear from you. What do you expect your main season to be, and what days of the week? Is it mostly summer weekends that you expect your highest volume?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Are you going to be operating year-round?
Yes.
So be year-round. Basically, summer weekends would be your highest volume.
Yes.
Do you only make those facilities available to people staying at your place, or will other people, town people or people, tourists who are staying at other facilities, be able to use your facilities?
Primarily, the hotel guests would have the opportunity first.
Mm-hmm.
The business model is
Sure.
basically built around selling a hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
Same as Rocking Horse, even our colleagues up at home. But absolutely, if there's an opportunity and there's availability on quieter times, local guests would absolutely have the effect. We're running more local specials at Rocking Horse than we thought we'd have.
I think we had discussed that at the last time you folks were here, and I thought your idea of looking at a variety of other destination resorts and what their policies are, and almost like taking a survey and probably like picking from that menu and crafting something that will work well for you and work well for our community. I think that would be a great way to approach it. You had suggested that last time, and I would encourage that.
We have you on board for application review. Do you mind if we slip in some other people first, just to get through them? So we have Diamond Car Wash. tell us where you're at.
John's taking the lead on it.
Okay. We received the latest comments from the town engineer's office. So we did revise the plan based on the previous comments, or some of them. There was some missing notes, we added that to the plans. One of the big items was the water usage for the proposed automatic bay and also the two proposed dog washes. Gentleman to my right here has some information on the water usage if the board wants to discuss that. There were some comments on a lease with the state DOT with regard to some of the encroachment on the pavement. We're proposing to cut back the pavement, not actually provide a lease with the DOT. So that's noted on the plan. The exterior elevations haven't changed. All that stuff is the same. As far as I know, those are the big items. The other stuff was just some graphic things on the plan, so.
Dave, you want to fill us in?
Yeah, I think there is a lease. There was a lease on the DOT's land. I just need a copy of that.
Yes, sir, there is. Right now, because of the change of ownership, when I was in contact to renew the permit for the DOT, they said they had to draw up a new lease, and I'm awaiting the paperwork. Once I have the paperwork from the DOT office and their procedure, I'll be happy to furnish it.
The biggest issue is the car wash has been a problem in the past. I know we got a new owner here. We had some issues with the quality of the discharge into the sewer system in the past. We had a problem with surge flows where the car wash was really dumping a lot of water from the plant. The Ohioville plant is not real resilient. You know, it runs fine as long as it's residential waste. It's not real happy with commercial waste, so we have to be very careful with that.
Sir, so because of those previous indiscretions of the previous owner, what I've been doing is I have a contract with an environmental clean company that comes and annually cleans out all the pits in addition to the 2 employees that I have on site. One of the big contributors to that waste is when the bays are not swept. So part of the duties of my employees is to make sure that the debris is swept up and maintained so it doesn't even enter the pits. So I'm trying to attack it before it even becomes a challenge, because quite honestly it becomes a business cost both from a water perspective and the environmental recovery system, the company that comes to claim that. Obviously it's not an incidental charge, so keeping any waste from going in there, you know, has a cost benefit besides environmental.
How often did you say you anticipate? Annually.
Yep.
And then you're encouraging your guys to sweep more regularly.
Mandatory every day as part of their daily duties.
And you were guessing that in the past it had not been swept?
If I may, my name is Todd Mills, I'm with Car Wash Products, and I've dealt with the previous owner at length prior to Brian buying the property. And basically, when we build and set up a car wash, and the original owner who did set the car wash did set it up properly, in the fact that every bay pit acts as a silt sediment chamber. So basically, the whole idea is you want to keep all the dirt on the floor removed immediately, less going into the bay pit, keep the bay pit cleaned regularly, thus it never gets into the large pits, so it never even should meet, sewer. The old standby was they used to just take the gun and spray all the dirt down the drain. So thus, all the dirt would go down the drain, it would then fill up the bay pit, it would then flow into the main pits. There are 3 1,500-gallon pits there before it even meets the outflow to the sewer. All those would fill up, and thus you had terrible water quality going into the sewer. Brian has since cleaned up each one of those 3 pits, and it's pretty much standard practice at a car wash. You keep those bay pits as clean as possible. Anything coming off a car hitting a floor is classed by the DEC as road sweeps. It's completely innocuous, and you can do whatever you want with it. Typically, the best practice is just get rid of it in small increments in a dumpster, what have you. And you never want that even getting into the pit, let alone into the large pits before it ever gets to sewer. And you literally can go through, he's an annual contract, I own and operate my own car wash, I can go 4 years without even ever needing to keep my pit clean, simply because you never let the dirt, you never let enough sediment get there if you keep it off the floors.
So that's the economic incentive. By you keeping your pits swept, then you don't have to hire this more thorough, this outfit that cleans it more thoroughly as often.
Correct.
So that's,
It reduces your overall cost to that, because there's 2 charges. There's one for the sediment, for the solids, and then there's a separate charge for the water. So when they vacuum each one of the recovery bays, they remove it all, and there's 2 separate charges. And the sediment is exponentially more expensive than the liquid.
okay.
There is a settlement agreement. I don't know if you had a copy of that?
I do not, sir.
You need to get that. I mean, there's periods when you have to measure the sediment in the pit. There's periods that you have to clean them, you have to document the cleaning.
Okay. I have the receipts.
Good. On the right track. The original flow for the car wash was 375 gallons per day, which is pretty ridiculous, but that's what was approved. It was, at that time, they said it was an 80% recycle. It was back in '94. It was approved. I've never been able to get a good sense of what the flow is on that.
I have the sewer bill here. I would give you the exact flow.
Okay. The metering on the sewer bill, the reason I have some concerns about that, the metering on that is the water use.
Yep,
There are 2 wells on the property.
correct.
At one time, only one of them was being metered. I don't know what the case is now for that second well.
Okay.
But that means that you can run the well for the car wash until you decide that you've got a good sewer bill, and then use the other well and not get metered. So, I mean, those are concerns. We just need to get some kind of control on it. It qualifies now for an equalization tank. If you're over 5% of the flow in the district, you may need an equalization tank. Right now, we have kind of a crude ball valve that limits your flow. There's testing that is supposed to go on by the town, and they will give you the results. If you are over the sewer standards, then there's pretreatment that's needed. We're trying to avoid all of that. I'm sure you don't want any of that, so we just need to work together here. We need to see what the plant is doing. I need to know more about the infrastructure on it, what the piping is. That's my main concern. There's some odds and ends here on site plan issues. There is a wetland there.
Yeah, the
John
wetland,
called to ask about a wetland, and if you look where the tower is on the map, on the property, it's very wet. There's standing water there, there's phragmites there, it's absolutely a wetland.
okay, so do we,
You need to know where and I believe the limits of that are pretty easily found. It looks like actually this was bill that was put in the area, whether it was 2299 was billed for whatever. It looks like the wetland was filled some years back. But I do need to know what's there now.
okay, so we can go out there and do a field verification, take some measurements, and
Do you have a good sense of where the pipes are? What's involved? I mean, he needs to know what the infrastructure is, and I need to know where the pipes are, where the tanks are, like some kind of a sketch plan.
we're trying to get a copy of the original approved plan, and we're still in the process. I spoke to the woman in the planning department, she said she was going to try and locate a copy of it, and maybe that has some of the information on it.
The tanks, all the tank structure, the well locations, that's all,
That's all set. Okay.
we know where all that is. Maybe the specific course from well to building, We don't have that specific yet.
Now, which well are you using?
The primary, number one.
And what is the status of the other well?
The other
It's
one...
disconnected? Is it filled with concrete or?
No. So there's two wells. The primary well, well number one, which is the one by the tow truck enclosure, the former tow truck enclosure. And then there's a backup well that's 300 feet deep approximately, that's out behind the car wash. That one, the pump was recently bad. So I just had recently had that pump replaced.
Okay, is there a reason that it doesn't connect with the metering?
I have no idea. That's a pre-existing condition. I wasn't aware that it wasn't metered.
But you have some information.
There's one meter in your office area.
Correct, yep.
Only one meter that I know.
Yep.
You said you're running 100% recycle on yourself?
On the self-serve, yes.
How do you do that? I mean, that's really hard on the paint.
What's that?
It's really hard on the paint.
Well, not really. What happens is the machine, we've set it up and did some upgrades on that too, so it's constantly cycling the water, and we also treat with a defocculant, so basically let the solid settle down and everything else. So, and we're using different type of biotab treatments to keep the odor down. And then there's also screens. All your tanks are held up above all the pumps, so any sediment that does get in there is pre-screened before whatever actually gets pumped back out and put through any vehicles.
There's a bubbler system that was in there. I don't know if that's still there or not. But
In
that was
operation.
really a part of the stirring up the sediment. I don't know if that's been changed now.
We're in the process of upgrading some of that stuff now.
And I need some product information on the pet wash.
Yep, I have it. Here's the entire brochure. Oh, here's the additional specs that the company had sent.
We can get additional copies if the planning board members want copies of that stuff, or put them on the drawings with pertinent information.
Those are the main points, I think, and just address the comments in the letter.
I guess we would ask for the planning board to forward this to Ulster County Planning, if that's possible. Get their comments so we can get the ball rolling with them.
Are you ready to do that, you think, Bruce?
Well, you're not going to make it for the first Wednesday in August, so.
Can you get some information on the lighting there? I mean,
Most
note
of
on
the lighting,
plan
I
that
think the
there's-
only lighting we're gonna change is maybe put a fixture where the dog washes are, but other than that, the lighting's not gonna change.
No exterior lighting changes.
But even to document that lighting system.
Oh, okay. Document existing, we can do.
Okay,
The county is really into lighting.
okay.
Without that, it'll be back.
So when would be the next deadline for them, so at least we can, if we can't make the,
Submission deadline for county, 10 days before,
Days before.
10 days before the first Wednesday in September. I'd suggest, for what you said, you follow best practices to maintain the system. Can you work with your engineer to add those to like a set of plan notes, is what needs to be done?
For just regular maintenance?
Well, whatever it is, put it on the plan, so in the event there is someday a future owner, we'll have a set of approved practices.
Hopefully I'll be the last owner. I don't know.
Hopefully you'll sell it to the
You only have interest in collecting money, not working.
Yes. So we'll have it all on one piece of paper that will be.
So it sounds like we should just put them on our calendar again before we send it up to
First
county.
meeting in August and then
so your next meeting is,
Tell when's the next time we would have time to put them on a meeting? 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
Check. So, like, we see the August 12th meeting, probably, so don't, August 12th meeting.
can't hear.
We have August 12th.
August 12th? You think, can you guys be ready by August 12th?
What, as far as the lighting and some of the dog wash equipment and some notes, yeah.
Does August 12th give you 10 days before the third Wednesday? I don't have a calendar. Do you have a calendar?
That would be,
First?
Oh,
In
yeah.
September. First Wednesday in September.
Oh, in September, yeah.
the concern is making sure we have enough information about the system to consider seeker, and,
Okay,
you know, things won't change.
yeah.
So perhaps, you know, I think we're doing
So there's a deadline for the August 12th meeting, which is 2 weeks prior to that. Which was yesterday.
Go back in time.
Just click on your time machine.
I mean, it seems like you have a lot of work to do.
Any other?
As far as Ulster County planning, it's got to come from this board, correct?
Any other questions, comments, concerns that we could work on in the meantime?
I think we're just trying to meet our engineers' needs. Okay, so you can give Kelly a call and get on the calendar for the next time when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, let me give you this. Give you a copy of that too. We try and get as many things on there as we can. Sometimes you miss some, but you have Dave's letter, so that's pretty much the guiding force. You know which one goes where?
No.
Good boy.
Right?
Huh?
That is technical.
Okay, extra space storage is up next.
Well, before the reporter present, if there's anybody else who wants to comment on Walbury, because you had said you would
Okay.
keep it open, maybe.
Yeah. Any other comments on Wildberry right now?
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask, is it all right then if we excuse the steno here tonight?
I think so.
Nobody
Yeah,
wants to.
yeah, if nobody wants to comment.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry for... Okay, where are we at?
We tried to go for a quick plan review, but the overall system size was 400 square foot larger than the requirement. No changes have been made since the initial submittal.
So, are you asking for leniency, or you don't know what to do, or
I'm
we have a
here to ask
procedure?
any questions, answer any questions you may have.
Stacy sent us a letter.
Thank you. Just a second. We're looking for her letter.
Okay.
How many square feet of panels do you have now? I see that you've got them on 2 different buildings instead of 1.
It's a total of 4,500 square foot.
And you changed building roofs here. I mean, this layout for the simplified had everything on this roof, and now you're doing part here and part on the roof line.
Yes, the adjacent building, the darker roof, directly next to, yes, it's a flat section of roof.
So you changed the layout a little bit.
Yes, just moved it to the opposite building.
Still the same footprint.
Same amount of panels, same components.
I don't have her letter. Do you have her letter?
Reflectivity
It's the
of the
same thing.
panels, is that?
The panels are at a 5 and 10 degree pitch. Reflectivity has been observed to be not a nuisance, being that the panels do have the intrinsic property of absorbing, not reflecting the light that shines on them.
I've seen some that are pretty reflective. I mean, they're at a steeper angle too.
Mhm.
George, can you help us out here? It doesn't qualify for simplified site plan. What's the next step before review?
Site plan review.
Site plan review, okay. So,
So the county goes to, you have to send it to county.
The system itself is maintained to the footprint of the building. There's no, outside of some underground trench work, there's no additions to the building. The square footage and volume remains the same.
What does it qualify for simplified?
Has to be a type 2 action, and that limits it to 4,000 square feet.
Does it make sense to make it smaller?
With the application that the client had put in with NYSERDA, that's the system size that they were granted, so
Yeah.
they would like to go through with the same system size.
Is this going to generate power for sale to the system?
The facility will consume all the power that's generated on site.
So there is going to be batteries on site?
No, all the power will be net metered, so when it will use the grid as the battery.
Right, but what happens if the utility decides to change their net metering threshold? If they only want to buy a certain amount from you?
Well, the building will always consume slightly more than what the system is able to produce. So even in times when the system is operating and the facility is not consuming, the system will quickly recapture those credits by consuming during periods of night or days with less amount of light, like towards the winter solstice. If you could see the size of the property with respect to the footprint of the solar, it is significantly smaller. There's much more room where the property could export much more power, but the power company is in the business of buying power.
They have a limit on how much they'll take. It'd be net zero at most.
Yes, they look at a 12 months prior to the system commissioning, and they take that and they base the ceiling system size on the consumption over 1 year.
can't run a cable to the guy next door.
No, unfortunately not. And even if you do start exporting if you, at the end of the year, have a surplus in power, they'll only offer you the wholesale rate, which is pennies on a dollar, and it's not going to make anyone a millionaire.
What does the facility use the electric for now?
Just for house lighting, security lighting in the property, air conditioning for the office facility, security, just basic infrastructure. This facility, I don't believe, is an air-conditioned facility, so there's no HVAC for the individual units.
It's relatively small.
Yes.
When you get snow off.
Off the panels?
No?
Just let it take their course. Once the snow starts melting to a certain point where it actually can transmit light through, the panels will start generating. It's a very thin layer of snow on there, but they will release heat and the snow will remove itself a little bit faster than...
That's why you need it at a certain pitch, too. What's the optimal pitch for that to work?
Well, the optimal pitch is more of a function of power generation. For the snow to fall off, the greater the pitch, the less the friction. So, but also at the greater pitch, you don't consume as much power or have the direct incident light as you would
Which is what Dave was bringing up, right?
during the summer, where you want to collect the most power because of the longer days. You want the pitch of the panels to be closer to the horizon rather than optimal to shed snow during the winter.
Flexible, so you can turn them up and down.
Yeah, once you add the mechanical parts to it, especially in the Northeast where you have
Yeah, you can follow
cold.
it all the way to the west.
Yeah.
Any more comments? Dave?
The short EAF was filled out. There were some items that were missing in that. The liberty to add those in. We need to get it signed also. Just go through the items that I added. Number 2 is, does the proposed action require a permit approval or funding from any other government agency? And the answer is no. Number 5, is the proposed action a permitted use in the zoning regulations? The answer is yes. Is it consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan? Yes. Is the proposed action inconsistent with the predominant character of the existing built or natural landscape? It is consistent. Answer is yes. Is the site of the proposed action located in or does it adjoin a state-listed critical environmental area? Answer is no. Will the proposed action result in a substantial increase in traffic above present levels? The answer is no. And are public transportation services available near the site of the proposed action? The answer is no to that. Does the proposed action meet or exceed state energy code requirements? It's not a building, so this is really not applicable on that one. Item number 14, identify the typical habitat types that occur or are likely to be found at the project site, and I just checked the suburban there. Number 16, is a project site located in the 100-year floodplain? The answer is no. Number 17, will the proposed action create stormwater discharge either from point or non-point sources? The answer is no. Part 2. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulations? The answer is no. action result in a change in the use or intensity of the use of land? Answer is no. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? Answer is no. Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? There is no critical environmental area there, so the answer is no. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? The answer is no. Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? The answer is it will not cause an increase. The answer is no. Will the proposed action impact existing public or private water supplies, public or private wastewater treatment utilities? The answer is no to both of those. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? The answer is no. Will the proposed action result in adverse change in natural resources, for example, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, or fauna? The answer is no. Will a proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? The answer is no. Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? No. So based on the plan submitted, the EAF, the information and analysis, the supporting documentation, proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts. The board could make a negative declaration to that effect.
Can I move that we issue a negative declaration on this project?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Now we send it to county?
Since county, it might be worth, because this is such a minimal activity, it might be worth seeing if it is possibly on the agenda for August.
For August? Okay.
Did we send it?
We did. They said no
We did?
impact.
No impact? Oh, okay.
We had comments?
No.
Should be fine.
That's the meeting Mike was at, remember?
Preliminary approval.
George, so can we do a preliminary approval?
Usually you wait to see if you get something because it's an unusual kind of application.
Okay.
I would say put it on the agenda for the 11th.
Okay.
For no comments
What do you mean, get something from who?
The county.
from the county.
But we got something from the county.
We did?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says no impact, no county impact.
No comment, no impact, yeah, sorry.
The one thing I would suggest is to note the added no glare off-site. Should be maintained so that there is no glare off-site.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I would suggest a note be added that there should be no glare from the fountain off-site. Because it is directly south of the throughway entrance is directly south.
Do these reflect in that way?
No, they're not intended to reflect.
Right. They shouldn't reflect, but if they do.
It wouldn't reflect any more than a skylight with some sort of reflective coating on it
What
in
direction,
a household.
what direction are they going to be pointing relative to the throughway, for example?
Relative to the throughway, they'll be pointing southbound. So
Straight
they'll
south.
be orientated parallel to the throughway.
Parallel or Perpendicular.
The entrance, the exiting from the southbound lane is around on the ramp. It's the right foot station. If there was a glare, I don't believe there was a glare.
It's pointed slightly southwest. True south is 180 degrees, and as you go higher in degrees, you go towards the west, it's 206 degrees. So it's
So you shouldn't have any glare.
no.
And nothing says you'll have no glare. It should be.
I can't think of any solar panels that have glare anyways. Where? Which ones?
In the solar fields that you see down in New Jersey, there's a co-op power company that's got about 25 or 30 acres. The right sun angle, you could really see it. It's a good thing. I like to see it.
For reflection, for a plane to be incident with reflection, it would have to be 5 degree, because of the tilt of the panels being 5 and 10 degrees, they would have to be near
Don't
overhead.
think you're going to have this problem, but a note will make.
What do you mean near overhead?
Well, if the sun was overhead
Yeah.
and the panels were flat on the ground, the reflection would come directly down and go back up. So the sun, these are at 5 degrees tilted towards the south. So if the sun was 5 degrees off the horizon and you were directly in line with the sun to your back, then that would be a case where reflection could happen. But as I stated earlier, the intrinsic component of the solar cells themselves is to absorb light and not reflect light.
So you can just put a note on your plan, no glare off.
Very easy,
That way
yes.
if
Could you sign this also?
Yes, sir.
Right there with the rest.
So you have county, you could consider a approval subject to the final review of the plan by the engineer and the chairman.
Okay. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion?
Thank you.
Okay, so we're unanimous to have preliminary approval subject to approval of our engineer and notes on the plans.
It would be conditional approval.
Conditional approval.
Would the additional note you would like to see on the plan or written directly in a letter from the engineer on record? On the plan?
There's no glare from.
What's that?
So many years from now, the,
Yeah.
go down the plan.
So there'd be no glare from the panels.
The resubmittal of the updated plan that will go directly to the building inspector?
You can send a PDF to me.
Okay.
And I can just say this is good. And send one to Kelly also at the same time.
What's the best way to reach you? Thank you. Thank you very much.
And then Mike Calamano will be back and he'll sign the plan and you'll have it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, back to Wildberry.
Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you for being patient, guys, to get some of these people out. So we don't really have any drawings yet, right?
No.
Correct. We don't have any site plan.
We thought that was a little
to review.
premature.
Yeah. So we're going to start on we'll wait for comments. If people send in written comments, we will get those to you through Kelly, and incorporate them into your scope, and then we'll review a final
Is it
scope.
appropriate maybe for a little work session? I don't know, to go through any comments and see if there's anything that needs to be incorporated. I only heard one thing that hit my mind that I thought needed to be incorporated.
Well, but there's, you mean now, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, but in between now and the time it's adopted.
Yeah, but I think the written comments can come in any time through the end of the day on Monday, the 11th.
Yeah.
So, and we can't account for whether or not there'll be a series of comments at 4:45 PM on the 11th. So maybe just to allow everyone the appropriate amount of time, it makes more sense
Yeah, we
to
don't wanna
be on
start-
for the 25th or something, and if that's okay with you. And that would allow everybody a couple of weeks to process the comments. I don't know, are you actually even meeting that second 25th of August? It's a week before Labor Day.
We usually do. Kelly, we're meeting the 25th, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you have room on the calendar for Wildberry?
I'm not here on the 25th.
How about you, Tom? Be here? We'll have to do a quorum check.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Okay, yeah.
we're only 4
Right.
people tonight,
Right.
and 2 people we can't
We'll
pull.
see if we have more.
Right, I'm just saying now, but
So it would be.
Well, obviously, if it becomes a problem, or you would feel more comfortable if more of the board members were here, we don't want to sacrifice
I
accuracy
always
for
feel that way
speed.
whenever we're making important decisions. No, I think it deserves the respect of the whole
Yes.
board that we
Yes.
have, you know. I wish we had a
Right.
7th member even, you know, that
Right.
we don't want to be making decisions with the minimal input. We want to represent all of New Paltz, you know, so.
Maybe something that would make sense is when we receive all of the comments, that is to say, after the 11th, if you, as a board, could give us permission to work with your consultants, and, you know, we could make a
Go through the
proposal for
comments.
what
Yeah.
we would think would be additions to the scope to address all the comments that have been made, review them with your consultants. Obviously, nothing substitutes for the decision on the judgment of the board, but that way we at least could move forward. And then if it turns out that you would like to put this on for a meeting in, your first meeting in September, if it ends up that you're short of members on the 25th, then at least we've progressed the
Well,
idea of it.
When I say short, I'm not thinking of not having a quorum, I'm thinking of having
A robust
a
membership.
robust membership. you
Well,
know,
this is an
so
important
that's-
project, and we
yeah,
want,
it
we
is
would,
important.
we,
I think
we will not ever quarrel with you on a desire of the board to have more members.
Okay, okay.
Never say never.
Hmm?
Never say never.
Okay.
Almost never.
Well, we'll see how many times it happens.
So we're going
I'll
to put you
start
on the
with never.
calendar for the 25th, and once we've polled and we know how many people are going to be there, I'm not saying I wouldn't do anything without you, but if everybody else was here, I would
Fine
do
with
something
me.
without you, but I would rather make the decisions with everybody present, you know.
And Tim would get a look at the, the proposed
Right,
final
that's
document
what I was
anyway.
thinking, that if we could
Certain.
work with something that at least would be a working draft and get it to everyone. I know there's an awful lot of people that do go away that last week, who would be leaving maybe the weekend of the 23rd, 24th, whatever. But if we could get it done between the 11th and the 22nd or whatever, then people could look at it. But we'll leave it up to you.
Okay, and
Out of curiosity, the comments about the need to look for soil contamination related to agricultural use, is that something
Well,
that
That was the one that hit my mind that we definitely need to include.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the one that struck me was a traffic study that sort of incorporates other projects that are going on also.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
allows for the-
cumulative, yeah.
Yeah, and
Cumulative
it
effect.
typically is, but I don't think it's spelled out in there, or it may be. Maybe we need to, I think previously we had addressed specifically what projects.
And I think your traffic consultant's comments addressed issues such as what you called the worst case to address the peak, these various peaks, that there's not just one peak like there is, there's peaks of special holidays, 3-day events, et cetera, to make sure that all those are being addressed, so.
We've mentioned this before, that idea of approaching the Thruway Authority regarding access to their on-ramp.
Oh, yeah.
Dave seemed optimistic that there is a formula. You know, I just think if you were able to secure that, that would just really streamline so much.
We would love it. My experience is that they'll never allow it, but maybe they've changed their position, so we're going to definitely reapproach them about it.
Fantastic.
Well, I think the support of the town would be essential in moving forward with them on that.
Well, that would be
Yeah.
great, if that's what is needed.
Yeah.
Now, on the peak periods of traffic, can the Thruway Authority help you out with the number of vehicles coming off on a holiday weekend? Or, you know, the numbers, I'm sure they...
We'll have to do counts during those peak periods, yeah. Just, Friday, somebody have to sit there Friday night and Sunday night.
Oh, the tolls.
Yeah, the tolls will tell you for the throughway, yeah. But they'll have to, 29, South Ohio, it'll all have to be studied during those peak
Well, I can
periods.
tell you
Now
this.
the traffic coming in is going to be coming in via the Thruway.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Living in Newport, there are lots
Events.
and lots of days where there are things at the fairgrounds, there's different activities around that it all cumulatively, I mean, makes it bad already. And I would imagine that something, you know, with the timing of the lights or something will have to be
What we
set up
never,
to-
I guess, really do is design for those once or twice a year events. I mean, what we're looking at, to me, is your typical, probably fall, Friday, Sunday, when everybody's leaving to go back or everybody's coming up. Those are going to be your typical high peak periods. I mean, we're not going to, you don't design for that 1 day or 2 days a year where you have these 3 events that just happen to occur.
I wish it was only 1 or 2 days a year.
Yeah. Well, you don't necessarily design for those, but you have to account for them in your traffic study and figuring out what you do design for.
Right.
To make sure you're not ignoring
I agree.
those
I don't
things.
think we're going to force anyone's hand to design for those 2 worst days of the year. But I think if we have an understanding of what they would feel like, that would be useful.
We'll have an opportunity throughout the year to see that at Rocking Horse, because it's not just the summer, even though we'll probably get some review before Labor Day weekend. And literally, Rocking Horse will be half the size if this builds out to 250 rooms, or 120 rooms at Rocking Horse. So it's very similar in the scope and scale and nature. The good news is it is counter-cyclical to business and school traffic, which you mentioned earlier, though, fairs and is another, but still, that's why that and our other property splashdown seem to work well, because while the school buses are quiet, people aren't going to work typically the Monday through Friday, it seems to work. But Friday night, Tim, as you mentioned before, you know, but we'll measure it. And geez, we got a working model with 3 shuttle buses. I see us having 8 to 10, and it really does work. That's a couple things I would argue is the shuttle buses really do work, and we're more remote. And not to knock the air out of New Paltz, but you know what the #1 attraction is? The walkway. It's killing it. It's killing it. More than Franklin Roosevelt, more than Splashdown Beach. They want to go the walkway. They market the crap out of it. It's a wonderful attraction. And Apple Greens is pretty good for us, too. But they usually, the pops will take the car. It's walkway, no car. Darn it. They are meeting the traffic, beyond traffic expectations. If they don't hit 1 million people this year, I'll be amazed.
I think, at least speaking for myself, further along in the project, I would be interested in looking at your facility, how you're dealing with the wastewater and treatment, stuff
Absolutely.
like that. Just it may be a little bit premature right now, but
The young woman, Ellen, I think, from environmental
The ENCB.
conservation, we were going to try to still set, I thought we were going to meet, it sounds like we're not going to meet at the August 11th. They still want to come out there before summer's over, and I thought it'd be great. So if there's an opportunity to still arrange that with them, should they
Well,
go?
but
Would they do
the
that separately, or?
ENCB invited us to meet with them, too.
Yeah,
So-
they would very
So we have
much.
the ability to do that.
So that'd be a separate
Yes,
entity?
that would be
Okay.
a separate meeting.
Yeah.
Well, we get along with them, so we could go on the same tour.
I like to actually show them both properties, because we're probably even more environmentally friendly down there working with
They
low
could
pressure
still
vacuum.
set a date for that tour on the 11th,
Heck
even
yes.
though we're not here.
That's what I like
If you
to
came
do.
up with something
Yeah,
and
that's true.
because if they're going to have a
Okay, and just,
And again, it's
Forum.
voluntary, if,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and interesting to
Pretty
see
cool
things
stuff,
at
actually.
different
If you're into water
seasons.
infiltration, we got some pretty cool stuff. We're getting more cool stuff
Should they
next
bring
few
you
years.
businesses?
Absolutely. We'll make you a lifeguard.
Okay, so 11th is the date for final submittal. We'll try to set up a meeting with your consultants to go over the final,
and we'll get you on the
incorporating
calendar for the
anything in and then getting
25th.
it back to the board so that if they have time for the 25th, great. If we can't do the 25th, the first meeting in September.
Okay. I would say that we could be on the 25th, even if we don't have a robust board, just to get the information out there to the public. And but we probably wouldn't be taking any kind of action or anything. I would hope that we wouldn't do that.
Okay, so that might
Okay.
be for discussion or release
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
document. But the vote might be
Yeah,
later.
yeah. I would, well, Mike should be back and in charge. But if I was in charge,
Okay.
if I was in charge, that's the way
I
I
see
would
what
lean,
you're
is
saying.
to look for a full board to
What would we be voting on?
we'd just
The
be
final
accepting
scope.
the scope.
I mean, that's the next thing to be voted on. The comments have to be taken in, they have to be considered by the board, and then the board would modify the scope in an appropriate way to respond to all those comments.
So you could write a DEIS.
Right, because then we go forth to write
Does the comment period remain in town?
well, it ends on the 11th at the close of business.
Okay, no matter when we meet.
Right, that period has already been announced to end then, and doesn't require a meeting, and it would seem to be too rushed to try to,
But if we could get it all together so we have it in advance, so that at the August 25th meeting that we
Right,
have
so-
something to deal with.
so we have the board's permission to meet with your consultants to advance that after the comment. Okay,
Because you're okay
well, that's a
What
plan.
you should do is close the public session tonight.
Okay.
There is no
Is there a motion to close the public scoping session?
I'd rather keep it open.
Keep it open through the
Yeah.
11th?
Well, you have to close it or the comment period doesn't
Never
end.
ends.
Never ends.
Because the comment
The written
period,
comment period is
the way that the comment period was arranged was to be 10 business days after the scoping session.
understand.
So that part's, the written part will still be open.
So it's still open for written comments till, and this was a very well advertised meeting. I think it was in the newspaper 3 times, 3 different weeks.
I'd like to see kept open also because, for one thing, I heard something I was not aware of today for the first time, and there was the possibility of toxic soils. I didn't know about that. So something like that happens occasionally, and I'd like to see the meeting kept open for additional comments because something else might come up that we're not aware of.
Well, it could be a written comment, but if we keep the public scoping session, then we never have the end of the 10-day.
Oh, I see. So 10 days is contingent.
I think that's what I'm understanding. Right?
I think
You could have a different number of
If something
days.
comes up at the next meeting, the applicant would be mindful and responsible. Since you still have to accept it as complete, even though new information becomes available to you, consider it.
Well, I make a motion to close the public scoping session. Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. No more discussion.
Discussion.
No, I'm okay with it. So the idea is if there's an additional public comment that's not part of the official open public hearing, you will include it in the scoping
It's always in our
document.
best interest to
Yeah,
answer,
of course.
because
Yeah.
it comes up later.
It'll
We
come
can
up
address it
in-
later, so we might as well.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public scoping session's closed.
Thank you very much.
We'll accept written comments until August 11th.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll plan not to be present on the 11th, right? But if there's either announcement of days available for site visits or any other information, if you know that by the 11th about the
Yeah, I
date,
don't think we have
let us know.
anything else to do until we get the comments.
Right,
together.
right. So we'll look forward to seeing you on the 25th or the first meeting in September, whatever works.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, we have,
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, David. Hello, Tim.
Good night.
I would like to postpone the solar zoning amendment discussion, if that's possible. Are they begging for it?
I'm not sure.
Is anybody even paying attention?
The town board actually has, the supervisor, has had some discussion with one potential use that may be interested in pursuing something.
What type of potential use? Because the document that you shared with us seemed very broad.
Well, it's generic. It's actually based on,
Some other town's code.
it's from Tonawanda. Tonawanda based it on the generic plan, recommendation from the American Planning Association. So it's pretty much vanilla.
It felt very encompassing of anything and everything.
It's one of the objectives of the rate hike, promote generation capacity between Albany and New York City. And you don't necessarily want fossil fuel generation. This is one way to help us get out.
But what type of interest has been expressed in
There are,
the
as far
project?
as I'm aware, two individuals have contacted, I believe, the supervisor, talking about a generating facility for solar. It will be approximately, I think in both cases, about 20 meg. And it's related to NYSERDA's efforts to stimulate facilities.
Are these private properties or public properties?
I believe both of them would have been private.
And
That's really all I know. There is some interest. It's not imminent, it's not critical, but it is something that is going to need some time.
probably needs an IDA grant more than anything.
Or a NYSERDA grant. I'm not sure.
Well, it just seemed like that code that you shared with us, just was very general, and I couldn't imagine anyone having any objections to any of it. It's very vanilla, it's very broad.
I think what's probably going to be more critical is figuring out where it should be located and what it should be. A solar facility, solar panels, wires, and some other infrastructure. The question is, where can it go? And that's partially an issue in terms of making the connection to the grid a place where it's economic to do so. Because the town for a while was looking at the possibility of solar at the landfill, but from what I recall, there was a very large connection fee for
Right, the cost to update the transmission lines
Yeah.
was expensive.
In Massachusetts, they had the issue of the zoning, of whether it permitted it, and proximity to lines, and putting them in neighborhoods, like they were trying to put them like a little small,
distributed.
into a neighborhood, and whether that was an industry, and, you know, it was a very complicated thing. They had a piece on the NPR about it a while back.
So I think that speaks to the potential for a hurdle. So was there anything in this code that spoke about where to put it, or
There was.
where you would consider not, or where would you not want
elevate
it?
the level of review by making a special permit if it's in certain environmentally sensitive areas, like floodplains, not in wetlands, but wetland buffers. So you would have an increased review. Talking to the building inspector, there is some concern that if there is a fire or if electrical fire related to the facility, you don't necessarily want that to be the place where firefighting crews are at risk. So she was mindful of that, but that's handled through a special permit requirement and reviewed by the fire department. And they're basically look at those kind of things on a case-by-case basis. So if there is a hazard related to the location, a special permit, maybe special procedures, devices, training that's required for the emergency services folks that need to be addressed first. We don't necessarily want it in that situation if those things are accomplished. But in a general, if there are environmentally sensitive property, it's really just a use of land.
So that would be a potential sticking point if it was in a residential area
Yes.
and the neighbors didn't want their neighbor to have a lawn filled with solar panels, right? I mean, what does the existing code say about how that is
I
handled?
don't remember what it specifically says about that, but again, that's the question. Do you want to make it a special permit? Do you want the special permit to require a hearing? If there is a hearing, what sort of issues should you consider? The fact that somebody just doesn't like it, the fact that somebody doesn't like their neighbor. Is it glare? Is it the lack of buffering that could mitigate that impact? There are buffering requirements in the code for a variety of reasons. So if you have a parking lot, you have to buffer residential areas to a certain degree. You could have a similar requirement for solar.
So in the example that you shared with us, I mean, I looked at it, but I didn't look at every detail. Was any of this issue addressed?
The buffering requirement, I frankly don't recall. It's been a while.
Right, yes. You first sent it out in
But
February.
I think in the APA materials, I'm pretty sure it was discussed that there may be recommendations that we can glean from
Because that would be great to refer to what already exists instead of us trying to reinvent the wheel.
There are a couple of fairly significant solar farms that were developed on Long Island, Brookhaven. There's another one somewhere else. The one in Brookhaven, though, is on the Brookhaven National Lab, but it is really large.
But the ground is all flat there.
Yes.
And they have a lot of farms, so they don't worry about losing a little
In
bit.
this case, they wound up going into a wooded area. So there's a buffer around it. There's a big cutout. So those are things you consider.
For example, in the village, somebody built a carport and put solar cells on it eventually, remote from any house. I don't know if you know the one. It's sort of near the stone houses, and very elaborate structure and everything, not connected to a house. I think I heard the rumor that they rented the parking places and built the solar cells on the top. I mean, that would be sort of weird if the lot next door put a structure for solar cells and there was no house and no, it'd be like putting an industry into your neighborhood almost.
I mean, there's a place, when you drive to Rhinebeck from the south, you take that side road and go to the county fair, there's one spot where there's just a big solar panel in the middle of what looks like a wood. If you look, you can see there's a house somewhere in the back. But, yeah, obviously.
There's a fairly large one down in Gardner, I think, on 208 maybe.
So you, as you drive around and you look at these things, you should consider if this was a new Paltz, would it be problematic? Is there something we can do to buffer it, to mitigate whatever impact you perceive? And how can we implement that in our land use regulation for it? Because it's, the governor has expressed a desire to make these things more possible. The NYSERDA is funding them. There is a economic incentive now to construct them. So there's going to be people looking to do it. The question is,
In some cases, you see solar cells, great, and you see them on pressure-treated wood structures, not so great. And you realize that they went down and they dug a hole and put a footing in. So, there's quite a bit of, to get that solar cell, there's quite a bit of destruction.
What, I don't understand the pressure-treated lumber.
Pressure-treated lumber supporting the solar cells, like a wooden structure.
Right, so like your carport example.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you're talking about the environmental impact of pressure-treated lumber? Or?
Yeah, you're offsetting the good environmental effect of the solar cells by
Putting on a structure.
putting on pressure-treated wood, which is toxic. Which if pressure-treated wood is everywhere, but it's like I think you would have a net zero gain there.
Sure, I got it.
but you approved a solar facility tonight. And I guess that's one of the things you can reflect on is whether there's anything about these that maybe you want to encourage installations like that. Just take advantage of existing commercial buildings. Maybe somebody can put one on top of Stop and Shop.
We have them on 3 different buildings as SUNY, and generally what happens is they haven't been coordinating the re-roof with the solar cells, so they get out of sequence. So the solar cells might last 19 years, and the roof is due to expire in 10. And so then every time you move solar cells, there's a certain number of them. It's like a piece of glass. You can't see yourself bump it or anything, but when you put it back down, like it's fractured, So, it's one of those things you can't just put them on buildings unless you have a plan of how that's going to fit with your maintenance costs or timing and things like that. But if Central Hudson isn't buying the power anyway, we have. With this zoning amendment, or they're anticipating that Central Hudson is going to start buying on a commercial level?
I don't know about Central Hudson buying it, but what's the purpose of that rate hike is to create generation capacity. So if people are generating, I would assume it creates an economic incentive for someone to buy it. And if it doesn't, then I guess there's a flaw in that plan. There's certainly flaws in that plan, but seems to be a critical one. And if no one's going to buy it, I assume no one wants to install it unless they have their own use for it. It's economic, if it makes economic use on their site, or if there is enough of a purchase from Central Hudson that it makes sense for them to do it economically.
That's what I don't understand about solar. It just seems like you're putting yourself at the mercy of a regulator who can change the game at any time.
Well, you could actually guard against it by using batteries, which at this time are somewhat expensive. But those prices are coming down really fast. I mean, technology is going fairly good. So it could really be literally off the grid by having those batteries.
But I don't think everyone should have batteries either. That's not really a great environmental option.
Problem too.
Well,
It creates a new problem.
if you got to store the electricity someplace, either use a grid for storing it if you can, or you have to have batteries. And there are people in New Paltz right now who are totally off the grid.
I understand. I don't think the answer is that everyone have batteries in their home or commercial buildings either.
Well, maybe it is something that you want to explore, getting a couple of some people who are in the industry who understand the economics to come in and discuss with you how you can make it better, more possible to do better things, not necessarily just do stuff, but do it with that goal that it's going to be beneficial. Do you know someone who might fit that bill?
The only person I know who seems like he's pretty aware of those things is that guy Randolph Horner.
Maybe he'd be interested in talking about.
But we're an administrative board. We're not a legislative board.
No, but you're making recommendations to legislators who may or may not have enough time to figure out stuff on their own. So if you propose something, they could consider it.
At any rate, I think we need to discuss it a little bit more and then bring it up in another meeting. Is that okay? We can look into it. Is this somebody you know, this guy Horner?
Yeah. Yeah, I think most people who discuss solar stuff with the local municipalities know him.
You could, for example, I don't know the exact technology to use, but I could see having solar districts, like you have fire districts and water districts, you have solar neighborhood districts where the whole neighborhood is plugged in. And if you're not using it, somebody else is.
Right.
Something like that could work. I don't know the exact technology to work it out. I'm not an engineer. I'm sure there's a way of doing it.
I'd like to move on to old business. We have some extension requests to review. I believe it's Vocaro, New Paltz Views, RAPA, Pyramid Services, and K&E. And I'm not sure how many of these people have actually asked for an extension. Is that... Wait. I do have one.
It seems like we have notes, or we have a request for each of them except K&E.
I guess I had spoken with Kelly and had her look into the status of the escrow accounts on these projects, and several of them, many of them owe money into the escrow account, and I know they can't build the project without paying up, but if they would lose control of the property or sell it or otherwise transfer it, somebody else could start a new project and never pay us the escrow and have no obligation to pay us that escrow. So I would like to, I spoke with George, and he's going to talk with the town attorney and see what direction they want to go, if there's anything that can be done. And I'm not talking about getting people to pay up right this minute. I'm talking about securing a position that we know that we can eventually get it.
Or their extension is contingent on paid-up escrow.
That might be tougher for some people than you think.
I mean, how much in arrears are we talking with some of these?
Some of those are substantial, 20,000.
20,000.
Could the town get a lien on that property if it's transferred to somebody else?
Not, well, I'm not sure you can get a lien after it's transferred.
No, before it's transferred.
If you have a lien, then you can, what I was talking a while about is doing a confession of judgment. It says, I acknowledge I owe this money, acknowledge it's a debt, and I'm leaving my property. So the basic theory is, if you go to sell it, nothing gets out. That's what I want to talk to the town attorney
is going to recommend that we just extend for 2 months, and while we consider this in a serious way of how to get this escrow account money collected. If we don't renew, then they lose the project and we'll likely never get it.
Okay.
So we'd like to take some action before their loss of status would occur.
That makes sense.
Well, I don't want to see the loss of status, but isn't K&E a little sort of...
Let's put K&E to the
Okay,
side for now.
For everybody else.
Okay.
Because
Everybody else,
K&E's
special case.
escrow and arrears is not so
No,
material
but
either.
he's
It's not like the others.
Disregarding whatever we can.
Yeah, it's a separate issue.
Is any comments
So you
on
want
these
to
other?
extend everybody for 60 days?
60 days will get us through the summer. We can have time for the attorneys to talk, let the town board consider what level they want to take it to. But it seems like some of these have been going on for years. And the people are basically using the town as a bank.
Yeah.
And,
That has to be, this should be the last extension.
Well, I wouldn't say
Or
last,
there has to be
but
some sort
But we
of
ought to have some
plan.
progress, some plan, how they're going to pay this, not just wait until their dream comes in, you know?
Yes. They sunk a whole bunch of money into getting approvals, and then there was big fiscal upset, and they couldn't proceed with the project. So now they're stuck. And what are we going to do?
We don't want them to be stuck or unduly burdened. We just want to secure that eventually we'll get it.
And we share whoever vote comes in.
So that
Shame
kind
on
of
us
goes
for
back.
letting them get out so far.
That kind of goes back to what Peter brought up as some sort of lien.
Yes.
Because without a lien, the property will be transferred to a new
There are
owner.
devices where you basically say, this is what I owe you.
But there's no legal device in place currently. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that has to be set up. That's fine.
So 2 months on everybody but Katie.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion to extend Vaccaro, Hampton, not Hampton Inn, Hampton Inn has started. Vaccaro, New Paltz Views, Pyramid Services, RAPA for 60 days, or what's the next meeting that's close to 60?
RAPA is current.
RAPA is current.
RAPA has money in escrow.
Okay. No, we're not, but we still want to just extend for the 60 days. And, or approximately whatever the next meeting is, what would be close to 60 days?
Draft for the 60 days would be the second meeting in September. Draft did submit a request for extension for Ms. Ball's hospitality Hampton.
But they don't need it anymore. They submitted it right before their site plans were signed, and now their site plans are signed.
Okay.
Take them off the list. So that's the motion for, I don't want to say 60 days, but does it turn out to be 60 days?
I'm not sure. Do you have the schedule taped in that folder of when our next meeting is? About the September meetings?
Here it is. No, this is 2013. This is the wrong one.
Wrong year.
Wrong year.
You got a phone? Do you have a calendar on your phone?
We would just extend 60 days, which is close to the last September meeting, which is September
22.
22nd.
We just
So
extend
it's like
until
6 days
22nd.
shy.
Okay, so we extend them until September 22nd. And like to be in the minutes that we're talking about the escrow accounts and put them on notice. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. What should we do with K&E?
The welcome news about K&E is that they have relieved themselves of most of the zoning violations that did exist. Yes, Kelly? There is one more ingredient that needs to be added to a site plan, and then
The outdoor cooler taco truck, which they put on the site plan that they brought to us last time, but it wasn't the site plan, there was nothing else on it. And they were supposed to come back with the original site plan, just adding the cooler.
too hard.
They did remedy their other violations.
Given that August is, maybe extend them to the first Monday, the first meeting in September.
Which would be the 8th?
First meeting.
First is the Monday.
It's the first one. Yeah, the 8th.
So, is there a motion to extend K&E until the 8th of September? No motions, okay. I guess we need more discussion. What do we expect to happen by the 8th?
Well, do you really want to know what I expect?
We should really be looking at what we discussed in previous meetings, because I feel like we drew lines in the sand previously.
14 times.
Well, if they do submit a site plan, and it is signed, there's a certain period of time to get a building permit before it expires. There is a limited amount of work that I gather they do propose, did propose. And one of the major concerns in the spring was the existence of conditions that violated the existing plan and the proposed plan. So if they submit a plan, it does incorporate the as-built stuff that's there now, does not have any violations on it. And it includes that structure. It would seem that the building inspector would then have a plan which could be enforced, which would not be. Right now, the issue has been, there's a site plan which was approved a long time ago. There's some things on the site plan that are not consistent with the way the property has been built out. And those things are generally okay, like the fence. So it would be in everyone's interest to have that become a record plan. And if there was a violation, that violation would be addressed. And there would be no confusion about what was approved, what wasn't approved, what was on the approved plan, what's going to be done and what isn't going to be done. So from that standpoint, it would make sense to the town to have that as a tool for enforcement. I just wish the applicant would make it a little easier to get through.
I know, I have to drive clear across town to get a beer now. I have to drive clear across town to get a beer now. Tom, we're waiting for you. We need some ideas.
It's your call, Tom.
30 days? Next meeting?
Do it to the next meeting. I mean, it's, the question is, when is something going to change? So I guess if you do it meeting by meeting.
Oh, the
Are we going to also address the escrow too?
For, what is it for, Katie?
Theirs is not that
It's
material.
$1,000.
But it's a good time to address it.
Sure. The others are much more concerning.
just my personal opinion, but it would be more important to get the plan filed and have the record than to get the $1,000. I'd like to get both.
Sure.
But
You will get both.
but I don't want to get one without the other.
But neither does the applicant, don't forget.
Pardon?
Under the town law, either does the applicant.
Yeah.
So if they do not have all their escrow paid, do not sign the plan
Right.
anymore. So it could then not change ownership because they're not a clear title. So they would not be able to change ownership of the property without a clear title.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be cleared, it would be cleared for a planning owner.
We would have title, we would
I
have.
apologize, not title, site plan. I apologize, site plan, that's been a long day.
So if somebody bought the property, for example, they would have
And kept it as an existing, they would not be able, they would not be, when they came to see Kelly to see that they have everything up to code, they would not have a signed set of plans as existing conditions. I doubt they'd be able to find a lender willing to go forward then. I doubt it will come to that, just so there is a mechanism there. Just as we are now following the mechanism of collecting upfront all fees. So escrow accounts are now established by the town board as they should have been, and we were not doing it properly. Now we collect all escrow fees. Kelly forwarded you all our last resolutions. So, going forward, we are doing
You
much.
lie, we didn't have that.
So going forward, we are doing a much better job on it, and we'll ensure that it is collected, and if there's not the requisite amount, then the application process stops.
Actually, most of KD is all those $10 fees.
So go back to 30 days and then we'll forget about that.
Okay, I make a motion to extend K&E for 30 days.
What's that, the 25th? Or the 8th?
It would be the 25th, I guess.
That would be
26th?
it should be the meeting, maybe 31 days.
31 days to the meeting?
31 days in July, so we think it would be 31 days to the second Thursday. Or just extend it to that date. There's no magic to 29.
Extend to the second meeting in August. Is there a second?
Second.
More discussion? All in favor? Aye. Nothing else? Make a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Second.
Any more discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Scoping session is still finished before that.
Were these resolutions that Kelly was talking about? She was saying we got town board resolutions